The dim moonlight illuminates the forest road, on which stretched the column of the retreating rifle regiment. Captain Tonkonoshenko's battalion is closing the column. We were unable to contact either the commander of the 720th Rifle Regiment or the headquarters of the 162nd Division. In the center of the battalion tiredly step my mortars. They are dragging 4 surviving 82mm mortars and the remaining mines, from time to time stopping and letting the fatigued fighters pass. I anxiously think, how long will they hold out? The third day on their feet, without sleep and rest. By dawn we had marched about 15 kilometers. Apparently, the enemy slept through the withdrawal of the Soviet troops, the previous day so stubbornly defended. And at noon to the head of the column drove up dusty Emka. Out of it jumped out an extremely agile, skinny colonel. Standing on a roadside stump, he shouted loudly, "Battalion commander to me." Captain Tonkonoshenko ran up to the colonel, introduced himself. "Hello, Captain." The colonel extended his hand. "I'm from the headquarters of the 19th Army. I order your battalion to deploy here. The task, to ride the road and at all costs to delay the enemy, especially his equipment, not to allow to break through to the main forces. Understood, Captain." "Understood, Comrade Colonel. Only I don't have enough ammunition. 20 to 25 cartridges per rifle, 3 or 4 mines per barrel, and only 5 shells for a 40-50 gun." "Take the defense, Captain. I'll take care of the ammunition." The colonel disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. Tonkonoshenko led the battalion to a large potato field, surrounded on all sides by mixed forest. The field was flat and easy to see from end to end. Captain Tonkonoshenko positioned the rifle companies along the eastern edge of the field. He chose a firing position for the anti-tank gun to the left of the road. And again the soldiers, having dropped their ammunition quickly, like moles, burrowed into the ground. 2 hours later, motorcyclists jumped out of the forest on the western side of the field. The accurate fire of the guard forced them to turn back and hide behind the trees. Soon the machine gunners appeared from there. They dash across the field, firing indiscriminately. The combat guard forces them to lie down. Having received reinforcements, the machine gunners resume their movement. The soldiers of the guard, shooting back, withdraw in an organized manner behind the front edge of the defense. They are supported by riflemen. Saving ammunition, Tonkonoshenko forbade to open machine gun fire without a command. The Germans were less than 200 meters away when a signal was heard. A long machine gun burst onto to work at once. Few enemy machine gunners managed to escape safely. The second attack began a 10-minute artillery and mortar raid. In the midst of the reflection of this attack, in the rear of the battalion heard machine gun bursts. Captain Tonkonoshenko ordered the reserve platoon to comb the woods and the mortars to take the defense front to the east. The second and then the third enemy attacks were repulsed. In the evening, when dusk began to thicken over the field, Tonkonoshenko received the order to withdraw. He secretly gathered companies on the forest road and quickly led them to the east. At midnight, the battalion caught up with the main forces of the regiment. Captain Tonkonoshenko explained to the commanders that while we were holding back the enemy, the regiment prepared for the defense of the next line. Our battalion was taken to the second echelon. The soldiers crawled into the open cells and fell asleep like so the regiment held on to this line for 24 hours, and again the order to withdraw, and again our battalion, which, according to the regiment commander, rested in the second echelon, covered the withdrawal. In skirmishes with advanced enemy units, battalion noticeably melted. In the rifle companies in the line remained only half of the personnel, Redili and the ranks of Mortar. In the evening of the third day of the retreat in the halt, Captain Tonkonoshenko, whose swarthy face blackened with fatigue, called to him the commanders of companies and platoons. Surrounding the commander, we silently waited for what he would say, and such fatigue was written on our dusty and shriveled faces that the captain, unable to stand it, waved his hand. Sit down, comrades." We were relieved, no, not to sit down, but literally fell on the grass, trying to stretch our weary legs more comfortably. "That's it, my friends," began Tonkonoshenko quietly and solemnly. "The end of the retreat. Ahead of us awaits a prepared line of defense. Our battalion has been assigned an area south of the village of Kalishki. We must hold it at any cost. We won't retreat any further." We were extremely happy with the news that now the battalion will fight in the native division. Having said goodbye to the regiment, together with which the battalion took the baptism of fire. The next morning we arrived in the designated area. Captain Tonkanoshenko went to Colonel Birch, deputy commander of the division. He returned visibly upset. It turns out that in the area of the village of Kolishki, concentrated separate units of our division lagged on the way to the front from the main forces. Where is the commander and the main forces of the division? Colonel Birch did not know. Our battalion was given a 1.5-kilometre area of defence on the left flank. Shortly before noon, the companies took the specified areas. Indeed, the sappers and locals did an excellent job. In terms of engineering, firing positions looked flawless. And for people, and for mortars, and for ammunition, there were reliable shelters. Petty Officer Okremenko, having examined the sturdy dugouts, admiringly said, "What a great place. The flies eat them. I would live in them forever." The mortar men's faces brightened up. "Hope, Flower will stop the fascist. And then we'll chase him back." I wanted to believe in it so much. While the petty officer and squad leaders were getting ammunition and putting their weapons in order, the men were resting, perhaps for the first time in 3 days. My platoon commanders and I tried to use the daylight hours to study the terrain and prepare data for firing. After midnight, a firefight suddenly broke out at the front line. It soon became clear that the German reconnaissance ran into our guard. The rest of the night passed quietly, except for the flashes of flares. Now and then the firefight, the rumble of tank engines in the distance. Everything testified to the increased activity of fascist intelligence and the approach of large forces. I went around the location of the company. I look at the faces of sleeping soldiers and commanders, how much they still have to endure, and it is not known who will be able to step over tomorrow. Back to the NP, I catch Okremenko there. The petty officer delivered thermoses with hot soup. In anticipation of a hot fight, I do not allow to interrupt the rest of fighters. "Dinner will be lost. The flies will eat it," Okremenko exclaimed with annoyance, pulling his moustache. "It's all right. I calmed him down. You'll feed him in the morning." In the dugout, Stogov thoughtfully spread out his overcoat on a pile of fresh grass. I suddenly felt so weak that I could hardly reach it and, falling down, fell into a black abyss. I was awakened by a sudden artillery raid. Jumping out of the dugout, I saw machine gunners running to our front line. Having hit the minefield, many fell down, but others ran in their footsteps. From our trenches, not a single shot could be heard. Sadisry crept into my heart. The soldiers and commanders hid from the shelling and do not see the advancing fascists. I rushed to the nearest firing position. I came across the calculation of Senior Sergeant Polivoda. The senior sergeant is working at the site. "Mr. Fantony, Polivoda, fire on the enemy infantry." "Yes, fire." Tenavoda waves to the loader. He quickly drops a prepared mine into the barrel, and it flies with a hiss towards the front line. Behind it another of the dozens of mines warned the rifle companies of the danger. They opened rifle and machine gun fire, and at that moment a barrage of fire fell on the position of the mortar company. The continuous whistling of shrapnel made us sprawl at the bottom of the trenches. The shelling ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Spitting dust and sand, I looked at my watch. Only 15 minutes had passed, but they seemed an eternity to me. Not a soul could be seen on the vast field stretching in front of the battalion's defence area. The attack has been repulsed. How many Nazi corpses were left lying on the field, it is difficult to count. The experience of the previous battle suggests that this is not yet a real attack. The fascists apparently probe our defence, so they attack not too assertive. Now we should expect a more powerful fire preparation, but for now it is quiet, not a single shot from either side. Taking advantage of the respite, caring Okremenko brings out thermoses of soup. I was in the first platoon when there, bending under the weight of a thermos, appeared a puny Stepushkin. He brushed off drops of sweat from his freckled face with his hand, and, pulling back the lid, called, "Come, boys, with the kettles." The mortar men, sweltering in the July heat, wandered over to the thermos. Stepushkin quickly poured hot millet soup with a large wooden spoon, which he had apparently brought from home. "Eat to your heart's content." And Lieutenant Voronov, having taken from Stepushkin the kettle filled with soup, turned to me with a smile. "We'll empty Fitdarmroti, Sitdenon. We'll empty this kettle together. If the fascists don't interfere, got us." "Yes." I pulled out a metal spoon wrapped in a handkerchief from behind my shin, sat down near the box with mines, on which the cauldron stood, hurriedly scooping soup with the spoon. I involuntarily thought, indeed the fascists at any moment can resume the hurricane shelling, and we will not be able to eat. No bread was brought. Liquid millet soup burned my mouth. Trying to cool it down, I blow on my spoon, looking at the Red Army soldiers around me. They eat reluctantly, as if by necessity. Their faces are pensive. What thoughts occupy them now? Are they thinking about the upcoming battle, which for each of us may be the last? Thinking of loved ones who may never be seen again? The husky, mocking voice of Vasil Siroshtin drowned out the clatter of spoons against the woks. Red Army soldier Selivonenko, how many times must I tell you? Don't sniff your nose when you bring your spoon to your mouths. You lose your appetite. What can I do, Comrade Sergeant, when my mother and father gave me such a wet nose? Karp Selivonenko responds to the joking remark of his favourite sergeant. Vin immediately salivates as soon as he smells food. Noticing instructor Petrenko, Selivonenko curves his funny thin nose hobbit over his upper lip. Wine gets especially wet when it smells gorilla nearby. Your nose must have smelled something in Petrenko's bag. You smile, Soroshtan. What are you hiding there, Sidor, from the Orthodox people? Military secret, Comrade Sergeant. Meshenko grins. The Mortars listen with interest to the humorous conversation started by Soroshtan. Their faces brightened, smiles played on their lips, spoons clattered more vividly against the woks. Coming up to me, Petrenko reporter. My delighted Septonrati. During the shelling, Shlevko was wounded. Is it dangerous? No, a shrapnel scratched him. I bandaged him up. He refuses to go to the battalion infirmary. Let him stay. I authorize it. Just make sure the wound doesn't fester. Shoving a spoon behind my shin, I go to the second platoon. And behind me, I hear Sereshtan's voice again, interrupted by loud laughter. What a good boy, I think. At the heart of the cat scrabble, but knows how to overpower himself and, in a difficult moment, to encourage his comrades. The cloudless morning sky, as if a kite soars ominous frame, and as if a cold breeze ran down my back, we silently follow the scout because we already know that its appearance does not bode well. Now we must wait for the imminent visit of Bob. But what is it? Ram suddenly quickly turned 180 degrees and headed west. It turns out that this clumsy-looking two-tailed machine has a magnificent speed, and in the sunlight glittered the wings of the curly red-starred hawks. They rushed after the fascist plane. No, come on, shouting around as if the pilots could hear them. I felt myself whispering involuntarily. Come on, brothers, catch up. I wanted so much that the Rama did not report to its headquarters the information it had gathered. The day passes unexpectedly quietly. Even the appearance of the Rama had no consequences. The Germans, having been repulsed and convinced of the strength of the defense, pull up the forces and make careful preparations. On the edge of the forest flashes sun bunnies from enemy optical devices. The enemy is studying our positions. A hard fight is to come. We stock up on ammunition and mines. Grenades were not allocated to us. However, the experience gained in previous battles suggests that anything can happen. Okremenko, who could quickly make friends, asked for some grenades in a neighboring battalion, the commander of the supply platoon of which turned out to be his fellow countryman. We made several bundles of them. We still feared tanks most of all. We had not forgotten how they irradiated our trenches, burying alive the soldiers who were hiding in them. Nikolai Fedorovich, I asked the petty officer, scout where we can get at least some gasoline. We'll find out, Comrade Lieutenant. I must confess, I didn't hope for success. But I was wrong. After lunch, the petty officer with a shining face appears in the round, wide trench, where we and the platoon commanders are discussing the results of the shooting. Comrade Lieutenant, your order has been carried out. Okremenko takes the smoking cigarette butt from the hands of the surprised Lieutenant Voronov, carefully tamped it into the ground, then opens the lid of the thermos, and the purest gasoline vapors hit my nostrils. Gasoline, the flies are eating it, loudly announces the petty officer. Where from? When I went to visit a fellow countryman in the neighboring battalion, I saw a wrecked truck. So I thought, isn't there any gasoline left in the tank? I took the boys, and the flies ate a little gasoline. Well, Nikolai Fedorovich, you've done us a great favor. Now we have to get some bottles. We'll get bottles, comrade, and vials. The flies eat them. Already in the dark, Okrymenko brought from the nearest village 3 full sacks. There was nothing, ordinary half-liters, and rectangular pre-revolutionary corks and quarters, and even some medical utensils. The petty officer had not forgotten about hemp. There was something to make wicks out of. Until the middle of the night we mastered our incendiary weapon. When the work was finished, I ordered Okrymenko to distribute 12.5 bottles to the platoon commanders, and the rest to carefully stack them in bags and follow me, having laid out our weapon in front of the captain. I showed it in action. The nearest stone, which served as a target, immediately turned into a blazing fire. The reserved Tonkanozhenko could not refrain from "Well done, Lieutenant. Wonderful. And where did you get the gasoline from?" Having heard the explanation, the captain said solemnly, "No, Comrade Okrymenko, I declare you a commendation for your ingenuity. Well done." Satisfied, Okrymenko proudly twirls his wheat moustache. At night, the fascist reconnaissance tried unsuccessfully to get a tongue. The sun had not yet risen from behind the horizon, and we were already in anxious expectation. To our surprise, the morning was unusually quiet. Even the gunfire had ceased, only again hovered over the position's frame. The loader from the 1st platoon, a young lad appointed instead of the wounded Afanasy Sidorenko, grabbed a rifle and, having arranged it on the berm of the trench, shoots at the plane, carefully aiming. Hearing the shots, Polivoda, the commander of the calculation, comes up to him. Usually calm, he angrily snatches the rifle from the hands of the young fighter. "What are you, your stupid head, wasting bullets?" The guy obviously does not understand why he is scolded by the commoners. After all, he bravely entered the battle with the enemy plane. Angrily frowning, he grumbles angrily. Why is he flying around? "It is not your concern." Clapper, the senior sergeant, softens. "Anti-aircraft gunners and pilots will get the German, but a rifle can't take him at such an altitude. You take care of your ammunition, it will come in handy when the German comes at you." The time is nearing noon. Okrymenko, having reported that he would go to get lunch, disappears. The sun is blazing and the soldiers are looking for salvation, who in the shade of the trench, who under the trees. As thunder in the clear sky, a gun's salvo is heard. A direct hit in the dugout blew up the ceiling logs into the air. I could see nothing further. A heavy mine exploded with a paralyzing howl behind the observation post. The second one fell almost at the same distance in front of the dugout, underflight. According to all the laws of artillery science, the next mine should hit the point where we had taken shelter. I shrink inwardly, but, to my great joy, the third and subsequent mines explode aside. I sighed with relief, realizing that the fire is controlled, apparently, the same newly minted mortarman as me. The ceaseless bursts shake the ground, shake the floor timbers, and rain sand on our heads. My orderly huddled in a corner. Koma Susik is covered with a trench coat, but he does not take the field telephone receiver from his ear. I'm worried about Stadiuk's absence. "Where is the junior political officer?" I shout to Stogov. He, not having heard the question, looks at me incomprehensibly. "Where is the junior political officer?" I repeat louder. Stogov straightens up and, putting his hand to his helmet, report. He went to get newspapers. They called from the battalion, said that brought the army for the honor of the motherland. If there is an opportunity to inform the soldiers of frontline news, there are no obstacles for him. I look out through the embrasure, trying to see something. A piece of shrapnel whistling above my ear makes me sit down. Soon a new sound comes through the crackle of bursts, an evenly increasing intermittent hum. Nazi bombers in the sky. Junkers diving, turned on the powerful sirens. We must admit that this wild howling is harder to bear than the whistle of falling bombs. The explosions of bombs, shells, and mines merged together. It seems that the eardrums cannot withstand. Shelving bombed, Junkers flew away. At once it became a little easier. Soon the artillery cannonade subsided. We need to look at the consequences of bombing and shelling and encourage people. I squeeze into the narrow gap of the dugout, which housed the mortars of Lieutenant Voronov. I was surprised to hear the sound of laughter. It is so unexpected. After the nightmare happening outside, the carefree laughter of people who've only recently undergone a baptism of fire. Entering the dugout, I step on someone's foot, and in response I hear such an elaborate profanity that I am numb for a second. "Who is it that speaks out?" The laughter is cut off instantly, and the master of artistic words, recognizing me, lurks. The silence is interrupted by Siroshna. The comrade lieutenant, it's Pavlo Stepushkin from the Pirelek. He thought that the German stepped on him. And again the dugout shakes with friendly laughter. Vasil, as Siroshtan was affectionately called by his minor friends, did not lose his sense of humor. Many wounded, Siroshtan. No, comrade lieutenant, no one has been scratched yet. The shelters are very good. In the sergeant's voice I hear joking notes. Only maybe you hurt Pavlo's leg, and now he won't be able to get away from the German. He'll stand or rather sit on the position to the death. And again his words cause a friendly explosion of laughter, but these explosions are pleasant to listen to. On my question about the state of the mortar, Siroshtan showed his hand in the corner. You'll see barrel and tripod here, and the plate at the position. It is not afraid of mines. Look, Sergeant E. I warned, leaving the dugout. Do not be late to open fire. Rest assured, comrade lieutenant, we won't miss. At the position of the 2nd platoon, a high explosive shell tore apart the dugout. Lieutenant Stepanov, in a helmet, pulled over the forehead, vigorously ordered. A group of soldiers quickly cleared the half-filled entrance. Noticing me, Stepanov wants to report what happened, but I wave my hand. Everything is clear. As soon as the entrance was cleared, the brisk platoon commander ducked into it. But apparently he ran into someone and backed away. From the dugout, on his knees, crawled out the commander of the calculation mission. Seeing the pandemonium of the Red Army, he shook his head and said something quietly. Nobody heard him. Gunner Fyodor Tolkanyuk and loader Fyodor Brashenko. I ordered to take them immediately to the surviving dugout. However, 3 more men remained under the rubble. Here appeared one of the rescuers. He is helping to climb out 2 soldiers. By their tall stature and narrow shoulders, I recognize in one of them mine carrier Vasily Shlevko. He was literally dug out of a pile of crumbling earth. Fortunately, Vasily's face was on the surface, so he did not suffocate. The third could not be pulled. He died under the collapsed logs. Sneaking along the course of the message, I come across the injured mortar men. They diligently shake off the ground from their uniforms, wipe their greying faces with handkerchiefs. Seeing Brashenko. I remember that today we thought to consider at the company meeting his application for admission to the party. Well, Fyodor Mefodievich, I ask Brashenko, will we have to postpone your application until a more convenient moment? Why is that, comrade lieutenant? Brashenko, who had come to his senses at once, was surprised. It's just a matter of time before German either sends me to the other world or my guarantors. Maybe we can make it before the attack, eh? All right, let's see what the deputy commander and party leader have to say. I shout through the rumble of new explosions. Maybe we'll have time to take you into the party. I'm turning to my observation post. At the observation post gathered all members of the company party organization. Stadnyuk, as if nothing happened, sits at a small table, dug into the ground, and laying out newspapers for the honor of the motherland. Despite the hurricane shelling, he brought the newspapers to the company. You should have waited, Ivan Afanasievich, I said reproachfully when I saw his left sleeve rolled up to the elbow and a fresh gauze bandage with a bloody stain on it. He waved his hand. There's no telling when it will all be over. I told about what had happened in Stepanov's platoon and about Brashenko's desire to have his application considered without delay. Stadnyuk lit up. So let him go. What is he waiting for? Stogov, run, call him here. Brashenko squeezed into the dugout and stopped, taking off his helmet from his head, looking expectantly at the deputy. Sit down, Fyodor Mefodievich, you offered Stadnyuk. And you, Partork, open the meeting. Shmevsov in a mundane tone, as if he was opening a meeting of a mining brigade after a day of labor, announces the agenda. Stadnyuk asks Brashenko why he had not joined the party before. He is silent, tossing his helmet from hand to hand, then looks around the audience and solemnly says, Without the Bolshevik party, it is impossible to win. I want to be in its ranks when our Radianska Batkivshina is in danger. Brashenko was a diligent and efficient fighter, but he was not known for his verbosity. He did everything in silence. Now apparently, for the first time, he spoke so solemnly. Embarrassed by his involuntary impulse, he lowered his head. Adhering to the established order, turns to the guarantors who knew Brashenko back in the joint work in the mine. They assured that Fyodor Mefodievich is long overdue to be in the party. that he worked before and fights now, as befits a communist. Having voted unanimously in favor of the new candidate for party membership, the communists warmly congratulate Brezhenko, and he, in response, often sniffing with excitement, duck nose. Rip. Thank you for your trust. Thank you. I look at Brezhenko, embarrassed by the general attention, at his face lit up with a happy smile, and involuntarily remember how I was accepted into the party. My father, Terentij Dmitrievich, having learned that I was going to apply, saying, "Think about it, son. It's not too early. Communists are special people. They are always and everywhere ahead because they should set an example for us, non-party. There are some people like, for example, my cousin Stepka Agafonov. In the summer of 31, when we were being agitated for collective farms, he suggested, 'Come on, Terentij, let's join the party.' They say that all the non-partisans are going to be Kula-sized, and their property will be given to the party members, so you and I will make a profit. I, of course, scolded him in our native Siberian way. However, I considered myself unsuitable for the party, because I was committed to private property. I loved horses to the point of passion. And I drank a little. When you join the party, you have to think what kind of communist you'll be, whether you'll be able to lead the people. That's it, son. Weigh everything before you apply. And if your guts are not thin in this case, step into the party, I bless you." I thought about my father's words, hesitated. I knew that I still had many shortcomings. I shared my doubts with the old communist Philip Minovich Shukov, who gave me a recommendation. It's good, boy, that you realize your shortcomings. But that's what the term of candidacy is for. Eliminate them, and you'll have the right to be called a communist. And if you do not have an unswerving conviction in the greatness of our party's goals, no willpower to fight for communism, then do not clog its ranks. Those who waver have no place among the communists. When after the meeting the communists congratulated me, I, like Fyodor Brezhenko now, happy and embarrassed, repeated, "I will try to justify the trust, and to justify trust, as it seemed to me, is not so easy. I believed that I could prove my devotion to the ideas of communism only by fighting the enemy. This conviction led me to the decision to serve the motherland with a weapon in my hands. And now I have undergone a baptism of fire, and in my soul anxiety. Do I justify the trust placed in me? Can I consider myself a communist with a pure heart? I feel fear in battle, a huge effort of will to force myself to go forward. When around whistling bullets and shrapnel, the sight of tanks gives rise to the desire to hide in some hole. Am I a coward? From this thought a sharp sense of shame seizes me, and I look around embarrassed. Do not guess, my combat friends, what shameful doubts torment my soul. After the meeting, unable to bear it, I took Stadnyuk aside and, blushing, "Ivan Afanasyevich, don't you get scared when we are bombed, when shrapnel and bullets whistle around us, when fascist tanks attack?" "Scared," sincerely admitted Stadnyuk and suddenly smiled. "And who is not scared? Nobody wants to die." I considered Ivan Afanasyevich a brave man. I was convinced of that, watching him in battle. More than an hour fascist artillery and mortars plough our defence. The artillery cannonade lulls, then again intensifies. Shells and mines do not let us stick our heads out of the shelter. And in the air continues a fierce battle. Starplanes through the dense cover of fascist fighters manage to break through to the bombers and force them to drop bombs wherever they can. One of the downed Nazi bombers crashed in front of the front edge of our defences and scattered wire fences. We were watching the air battle with bated breath when the trenches rang. Me, tanks. The squat steel boxes seem toy-like from afar. They're approaching our front line. The infantrymen are hiding behind them. Orienting myself by the points shot on the ground, I give the command to open fire on the infantry. Shots are not frequent, but the mines are surprisingly accurate. I am pleased to note that the commanders of the squads are using mines more sparingly. Several mines burst in the chain of attackers. Here the tanks crawl into the minefield and 2 of them freeze with torn tracks. The rest turn. So ends the first attack. Soon shells and mines plough the ground again. Fire raid lasts 20 minutes. Again there are hits in the dugouts. Again we dig out half-filled soldiers. The passages of communication in many places collapsed. The death of mortarmen painfully resonates in the heart. Shells and mines continue to plough the positions of the battalion. The incessant whistling of shrapnel forces everyone to sprawl at the bottom of the trenches. But new anxious cries of tanks lift me off the ground. and, forgetting about the bullets and shrapnel that continue to whistle through the air, I stare intently ahead. This time the tanks, under cover of hurricane mortar and artillery fire, lined up in 2 columns and pulled into the corridors made by the tanks during the previous attack, anxiously looking toward the firing positions of battalion guns. They were hidden in clouds of dust and smoke, raised by the bursts of enemy shells and mines. It seemed that the iron would melt in this fiery whirlwind, and suddenly my heart beat joyfully. From the firing positions of the battalion guns came the piercing shots characteristic of the 40-pounders. One after another 4 tanks burst into flames. The remaining 5 still managed to slip into the positions of rifle companies. Fortunately, our artillery put such a dense fire screen in front of the Nazi infantry that it could not break through after the tanks. My mortars also did their best. They got so carried away that they used up all the mines. However, I did not reproach the platoon commanders for such waste, for the goal had been achieved. The fascist infantry had retreated, and the tanks that had broken through to the positions of the rifle companies were burning. I was glad to see that the bottles of flammable liquid that Colonel Birch had sent to the battalion and petty officer, Okremenko's vials filled with gasoline, helped our infantrymen. Simming twilight and acrid smoke, hanging in the hot July air, made it extremely difficult to observe the battlefield. It became even more alarming. It seemed that the surviving fascist tanks were about to jump out of the dark veil and start to irrigate our positions. My fears were not justified. When it got dark, there was a lull. Only on the left flank of the battalion continued machine gun duel. Omniscient Okremenko, having delivered the next batch of mines, with undisguised anxiety reported that at junction of the battalion with the neighbouring rifle regiment, the fascists managed to cut into our defence for 800 metres. At the command and observation post of Captain Tonkonozenko arrived Colonel Birch and the commander of the neighbouring regiment. What they talked about with the commander, Okremenko did not hear, but saw how from the rear to the left flank of our battalion came fresh companies. Having reported this, Okremenko concluded with a mysterious look. Now something at night will be, because I not for nothing there appeared Comrade Colonel himself. Maybe our turn will come, Comrade Comrati. What do you... I shrugged my shoulders. Suddenly Stadnyuk, who had appeared next to me, made a grim joke. Well, Mr. Germans went to dinner, and there and go to bed. We can take a break. The words of the junior political officer were not far from the truth. German punctuality in the first weeks manifested itself in the war. At 5 o'clock, breakfast, at 12 o'clock, lunch, and at about 21 o'clock, dinner. Therefore, with the onset of darkness it became, as a rule, relatively quiet. In the mortar company, 31 men survived. 9 of them, lightly wounded, Okremenko. In the ear, Comrade Lieutenant, angrily reported he do not want. Eat them flies, go to the sandboat. Take us, they say, to the commander. What's going on, Comrade Lieutenant? Among the stubborn I see Soroshtan. Both his hands are bandaged. He looks exhausted. I go, Vasily Andreevich, you should get better. Then you'll fight more. Permission to stay, Comrade Lieutenant. Soroshtan is trying to look brave. Here is a talcum powder on my neck and on my arms, so they're scratched. Noticing my hesitation, Soroshtan frowned. So here's no one to fire in the formation. Steklov was killed. Stepushkin is wounded. So everyone counts, and we should count for the dead. I look at the soldiers with rapt attention and suddenly feel the traitorous moisture fogs my eyes. I allowed some of them to stay in the ranks and categorically ordered Stepushkin to go to the infirmary. Petrenko reported that his leg was swollen. The wound festered. Stepushkin silently puts his hand to his cap and tries to turn around, but from the pain he can barely stay on his feet. I manage to support him. Yet better and come back. We'll fight together again, Stepushkin responds with a firm handshake. At the 3rd hour of the night, on the left flank of the battalion, a fierce firefight broke out. Machine guns and automatic rifles were continuously firing. Rockets were flying into the air. The fascists opened a hurricane artillery and mortar fire. Only at dawn it began to subside. Without waiting for the call, I ran to the commander to clarify the situation. Captain Tonkonozenko met me with a mocking smile. Well, mortarman, overslept. And here we gave the fascists a light. From Tonkonozenko's explanations, I understood that the night counterattack of the neighbouring regiment and the left flank company of our battalion had knocked out the fascists. This time punctuality failed the Germans. The night counterattack caught them asleep. I returned to the company in high spirits. The lesson taught to the fascists strengthened faith in our strength. That's why we took the enemy's artillery preparation that started at 8 o'clock calmly. The rifle companies confidently repelled the attack of fascist infantry. Mortars helped them with accurate fire. At 10 o'clock, suddenly called Tonkonozhenko. He spoke, as usual, briefly, without raising his voice. Listen carefully. At the junction with the left neighbor, 30 fascist tanks accompanied by infantry broke through to our rear. Immediately organize a circular defense, not a step back. On the appearance of the enemy, immediately calling platoon commanders. I draw the current situation and give the appropriate orders. I leave only the gunner and the loader at the mortars. The rest are sent to the rifle chains. Ammunition and grenades were divided equally. We had hardly had time to take a circular defense as the fascists appeared from the east. Platoon commanders, carrying out my orders, let them up to 80, 100 meters, and only then commanded to open salvo fire. The surviving Germans crawled away, taking cover in the craters. Then, on a curt command, they almost simultaneously, like targets at a firing range, rise and rush forward, driven by a tall, dapper officer in a helmet. The mortars shoot the attackers at point-blank range. I aim carefully and shoot at the officer, right in his screaming mouth. The firefight has been going on for half an hour. We must do something before the Nazis get help. I do not dare to counterattack for fear of heavy losses. Lieutenant Voronov proposes to go to the rear of the fascists and suddenly attack. I liked this idea. However, the whole company to perform the maneuver inconspicuously impossible. So we make an attempt to deceive the fascists. 5 of the most desperate fighters under the command of Voronov bypass the Nazis, crawling from funnel to funnel. When they were 40 to 50 meters behind the fascist chain, Voronov jumps up and, throwing a grenade, shouts, "Sie sind umlaufen. Werf die Gewehr." That was all he knew in German. Remembering that the word battalion sounds the same in Russian and German, the lieutenant commands in a Dupachesque ringing voice. Metatel OOON, prepare to attack. Voronov, after the battle in a moment of revelation, admitted that at this critical moment he prepared for the worst. His heart was pounding frantically. Moments seemed to him hours. He already felt how dozens of enemy bullets sink into his body. However, the events unfolded quite differently. We saw how the Germans one by one began to rise without weapons. When they found out that there were only 6 brave men, 3 of them tried to grab their automatic rifles, but fell down, hit by accurate bullets. This served as a signal. Together with the rest of the mortars, I quickly overcame the distance separating us from the enemy. Without giving a second thought, we pushed the fascists away from the weapons lying on the ground. They're a difficult task. Where to put more than 30 prisoners? It is dangerous to lead them to the rear. There is a battle going on there. And we decided to transfer them to the neighbor's site on the right, where the defense is not broken. I entrusted Okremenko with 2 men to escort the prisoners. After examining the prisoners, Okremenko clutches his head. What faces? Do flies eat them? They are bandits. How will I deliver them, comrade lieutenant? They'll run away. I hesitated. Such a possibility could not be excluded, but the petty officer finds a way out. He orders the idea men to take off their waist belts and unbutton their pants. The prisoners do not understand him. Then Okremenko does this operation on himself. The Germans are surprised at Okremenko's action. They do not realize what they are being asked to do. Swearing in the purest Ukrainian language, the petty officer pulls forward one of the prisoners, removes his trouser belt and undoes all the buttons and hooks. The stunned German, with both hands, tightly grasps the wide-falling pants, and Okremenko, shoving the belt into his hands, says satisfied, "Keep it like this. Understand?" The prisoners are silent. Saido Petrenko, a San instructor who was known in the company as a connoisseur of German, comes to the aid of the petty officer. Having mobilized his linguistic knowledge, the orderly tries to explain the actions of the petty officer. Finally, through the combined efforts of the petty officer and the instructor, the prisoners understood what these cranks Russians wanted from them, and with apparent reluctance they obeyed the order. Satisfied with the precautions he had taken, Okremenko ordered one soldier to follow in front and point the way, and he and the second soldier, holding the captured automatic rifle at the ready, joined the rear. Looking at the strange column, accompanied by the cry of "U vorwärts," You forvertitist Mortars laughing amicably. Despite the tragic situation, the picture was really funny. The prisoners, holding both hands on his pants, running, driven by the menacing shouts of angry mustachioed petty officer. When the prisoners disappeared, Petrenko came up to me. Comrade Lieutenant, he reported. One prisoner said that their officer announced, a little more pressure is required, EB and the Russians will run away. Well, what did you say to him? You see, Comrade Lieutenant, I didn't have enough words, so I gave him this. Our homegrown interpreter shows his weighty hairy fist. The fascist, I think, understood my point. It's the capture of a group of fascists, realized without losses, excited the fighters. Their exhausted, sweaty faces brightened up. Jokes were heard. Now I could lead them in an attack on a whole fascist battalion. They would not hesitate. The soldiers calmly and businesslike equip the trenches, preparing to repel new attacks. I look at them, and I don't recognize them. A month ago they were timid before each combat shot. How they have changed in this short time. Days of fighting have left an indelible mark on their faces. Some of them have silver threads in their hair, and the older the age, the more noticeable these traces. One thing was Glide became stronger in spirit, and the deep-seated fear of a superior and all-destroying enemy was replaced by hatred and self-confidence. Having got rid of the uninvited and dangerous in such an unclear situation guests, I examined the positions where the mortars prepared to repel the next attack of the fascists. After all, the battle in our rear is not subsiding. Short machine gun and machine gun bursts are breaking through the whine of the guns. The situation is becoming more and more alarming. The attack from the rear can be repeated at any moment. Stadnyuk and I go around Stefan Polyvoda gathered a group of mortars. Carefully looking over the terrain, the commander of the calculation instruct. You boys, do not be afraid of the Nazis. Lie down as if you see them in the movies and calmly hit the choice. Don't think that there are a lot of them. As soon as you think that, your hands will tremble. You don't have to shoot them all. It's enough to take out their commanders. The rest will lie down. They're counting on us to panic too, so they shoot wherever they see fit. They're trying to scare us, but they can't take us like that. Noticing us, the senior sergeant interrupts his story and, stretching out, reports that everything is in order in his squad. Suddenly Tonkanozhenko appears, leaning on a thick bough. One of the captain's feet is shoed in an elegant chrome boot, and on the other is a soldier's boot. Through the open pant leg of the blue gallifet, painful bandage. With the combatant came 36 soldiers and commanders. Are you wounded, comrade captain? I asked anxiously. Nothing. The bone is not hurt. Over the past few days, I sincerely liked this cheerful and calm man, whom I involuntarily wanted to be like. Ivan Petrovich is 8 years older than me, and I look at him as a schoolboy at the adored teacher. Both axis in him conquers me. Both exemplary alignment in a commander and brilliant erudition. Talking with him, I am always convinced of his superiority over myself, but the main thing, Tonkanozhenko impeccable restraint. In these difficult days, I never once noticed on his face no shadow of confusion, as if he had foreseen everything in advance. Ivan Petrovich was undoubtedly a brave man, but he never bragged and did not like those who unnecessarily went under bullets. I was a witness of the recklessness of Lieutenant Zerdev, the commander of the communications platoon. When the captain saw him walking leisurely to the observation post under the whistle of bullets, carelessly knocking down dandelions with a homemade cane, he blushed, which was a sign of growing anger. After listening to Zerdev's report, who reported on the restoration of communication with the neighboring battalion, Tonkanozhenko said immediately, "If I see your criminal bravado again, Lieutenant, I'll court-martial you." The lieutenant, who had not expected such a reprimand, was confused, and the captain, approaching him closely and putting his hand on his shoulder, added reproachfully, "Remember, Zerdev, truly brave men do not put their heads under bullets unnecessarily. Bravery is the highest manifestation of the power of the human spirit to achieve some noble goal. For the sake of it, one can sacrifice one's own life, and the one for whom life, a penny, reckless and, in my opinion, harmful to the collective man." The news of the reprimand received by Zerdev quickly spread in the battalion and warned us, young commanders, against unnecessary bravado. Taking a map out of his clipboard and unfolding it, Tonkanozhenko said, "Look here, Lieutenant. Infantry and tanks that broke through to the left of the positions of our battalion, stopped and destroyed by the reserves of the neighboring division. At my NT recently visited Colonel Birch together with the commander of the neighbouring division. They reported that the controlled neighbouring rifle regiment attacked by a battalion of infantry and enemy tanks. I was ordered to take from the battalion all who can, and together with the commandant's company and artillery battery of the neighbouring division to destroy the enemy. I have collected 32 men. There is nowhere else to take. Take off your company and follow me. Leaving 2 mortars under the guard of 2 soldiers. We take the rest with 20 mines, the whole stock of grenades and bottles of gasoline, and hurry after the commander to the height, overgrown with bushes, from behind which comes shooting. In the low ground we join the commandant's company and a battery of 4 guns. After sneaking through the bushes, we see in 1.5 kilometers in front of us a small village, which is shelled by the Nazis. 2 burning tanks stand 100 meters away from the village, smouldering with tarry smoke. The other 10 have taken cover in the lowlands and are firing sparingly. They are answered from the village guns, so well camouflaged that we cannot determine where they are. We're at the control center of anti-tank guns. Surprised the commander, studying the location of enemy forces through binoculars. The division commander did not say that the surrounded have artillery. Its 40-50 guns shoot armor-piercing, explained a gaunt senior lieutenant, battery commander. That's what scared the Nazis. If it were not for them, the tanks would have long ago drowned the village. Tonkonoshenko, without lowering his binoculars, ordered battery commander, stealthily set the guns in the thick shrubbery on the southern, western and eastern slopes. Camouflage them. The first to open fire should be the guns of the southern slope. If the tanks move to the southern slope, the remaining guns hit them flanking. If even the tanks do not come at us, they will be forced to engage in a duel of fire with our guns, and they will no longer be to the headquarters of the regiment. And the infantry, caught between 2 fires, without the support of tanks, will not dare to attack. Then Tonkonoshenko called the commander of the commandant's company. "Nay, comrade captain, the task of your company is to cover the artillerymen from the infantry, to entrench in front of the guns and stand to the death." The company commander, chewing his lips and stroking his lopsided black mustache, said in a hoarse, smoky voice, "The company cannot entrench. It has no sapper spades. Apply to the terrain, be mean warriors." Then he ordered us to allocate 10 small sapper blades to the commandant's company and to secure ourselves. A tall, broad-shouldered and red-cheeked lieutenant on the right of the commandant's company, and me with the mortars on the left. The Nazis, apparently, have not yet discovered us. From the hatch of one tank, 3 red rockets soared into the sky, and the tanks crawled towards the village. The tankers did not suspect that, maneuvering put the side armor, the Achilles heel of their vehicles, under the fire of our guns, and the artillerymen, taking advantage of this, contrary to the plan of the commander, fired at once from all 4 guns. One tank went up in smoke. Another tank's caterpillar splintered. The others scattered across the field. Suddenly, the tank from which the rockets were fired, followed by 5 more, turned around and, gaining speed, rushed at us. Behind the tanks, the infantry are moving in shifts. The tanks that remain in place continue to duel with the guns that were in the village. I look at the inexorably advancing squat tanks, and a sneaky fear lurking somewhere in the depths of my soul whispers, "Oh, you Annika the warrior, what can you do with these armored monsters? You're lying in the open. You haven't even had time to dig in properly. Now these steel behemoths, rumbling, spewing deadly shells from their cannon mouths, will crush you into the ground. Run, madmen, save yourselves, hide in some hole." That's how tank fear is born, flashed in my mind. It is caused by disbelief in one's own strength. If you do not overcome this fear, the fear will tear you from your place in search of rescue, and others will run after you without thinking. We must not allow panic to break out in our ranks. And people who are running around in unconsciousness are a great target for machine guns. I looked anxiously at the positions of the commandant's company, which had not yet been fired upon. "Hold on, my darlings," I mentally pray to the lurking soldiers. "The devil is not as bad as it is made out to be. The waiting is unbearable. I want to do something immediately." Unexpectedly for myself, I break from my seat and lightning rush over to the mortars lying in front. I want to make sure that they are ready to meet the tanks, running headlong into the hillock, in front of which a machine gun line boiled up. I shout, trying to give my voice confidence. "Don't be timid, boys. The fascists, even behind the thick armor, are shaking from fear of us. See how carefully they are sneaking around. And we are not timid, we gains Siroshtan. I have to hold Hadar Mefodivich's legs with both hands because he is like a tiger tearing at the tank. I persuade him, don't waste your strength in vain, Cum, bear it a little, and the beast will roll up to us by itself. Then you roast it. Noticing Fedor Brashenko's surprised look, Siroshtan jokingly clung to his huge Kirtzovi boots, shouting, pleading, don't be in a hurry, Kevdor Mefodevich, just be patient. The tank itself will come crawling. Under friendly laughter of comrades, Brashenko, with all seriousness, tries to tear his legs out of Siroshtan's hands. Leave me alone, comrade sergeant. He resents. I'm not rushing anywhere, I'm lying still. By God, comrade Komrati. Brashenko crossed himself. That day, yay, Khadar Mefodivich, shakes his head reproachfully. Siroshtan, how did you conceal from us when you joined the party that you had not yet freed yourself from the Pupish stupefaction? Yes, I am free, leave me alone. You son of a bitch. Brashenko got seriously angry. It's my habit. I returned to Stadnyuk, who met me with a reproachful look. Why are you, Alexander, running under bullets? Having listened to my story about the mood of the fighters, he remarked, when people are able to joke, you cannot worry about them. Meanwhile, the fascist tanks moved forward again cautiously, and again we concentrated all the fire on the infantry running over. They lay down, but the tanks continued to advance. Seeing how the shells, shooting sparks, bounce off the frontal armor, I automatically pull up a bottle of gasoline, the only hope for a favorable outcome when meeting with a tank. And at that moment, someone who was lying on my right jumped up and, shouting, save yourself, crush at, stop, get back, I shout, not recognizing my voice. I know that the spark of panic must be extinguished before it flares up. I try to pull the trigger, but my finger does not obey, as if petrified. How hard it is to shoot at your own fighter, but the fascists were ahead of me. The panic-stricken soldier fell down, hit by their machine gun burst. However, in the location of the commandant's company, one after another soldiers jump up one after another and under machine gun fire run up to the bushes. Only one man manages to escape. When the tanks approached 300 to 350 meters, camouflaged guns hit them from the flanks, and the next 100 meters managed to overcome only 4 cars. 3 of them moved to the position where the men of our battalion were lying down, and 1 on the remnants of the commandant's company. At this critical moment, 3 men crawled towards the tanks. From the positions occupied by the men of our battalion reserve, someone quickly moved forward in a crawl. In the other 2, I easily recognized the inseparable Fedorov, Tolkonyuk, and Brashenko. Long, skinny Brashenko wriggles snackily, not an inch off the ground. I can't take my eyes off these people who stepped towards death. After all, it is difficult to expect to survive in a fight with a tank. They realize the danger they're in, of course. They realize it, and yet they went, without orders, out of duty. The distance between the daredevils, who are masked by tall grass, and the tanks is rapidly shrinking. Fyodor Tolkonyuk jumped up, swung, and immediately his raised hand fell powerlessly. Trying to hold the bundle, Tolkonyuk knelt down, not rising, rushed towards the tank, and, as it seemed to me from afar, with special care put the bundle under the track. The cloud of explosion hid the fighter for a moment. The tank, rolling a few meters by inertia, spun on the spot. Suddenly the car, in front of which Fedor Brashenko was crawling, swerved to the right. Brashenko's donkey-hot figure sprang up from the ground. Tangling his long legs in the grass, the soldier ran after the tank. Having lost, apparently, hope to catch up with him, Brashenko threw a heavy bundle with both hands and, losing his balance, sprawled on the ground. A cloud of explosion went up near the tank, but he kept moving. Having dodged to the right, it bypassed the mortars and was now bearing right on the knoll behind which I had established my observation post. Well, Ivan Afanasyevich, it's our turn. Let us not disgrace the Russian land, I shouted, feeling my heart fluttering in my breast like a frightened bird. We will not be shamed, Sasha, smiled visibly pale Stadnyuk and recited, fate has given us only 2 outcomes, either to win or to fall with honor in battle. For some reason, Ivan Afanasyevich always recited poetry in a moment of danger. Suddenly the tank took the right again. He was obviously in a hurry to the cannon camouflaged there. We must intercept it. A thought flashed through my mind. Keeping my eyes on the tank, I tried to find a bottle of gasoline and did not find it. With bewilderment, I turn my head and see how Stadnyuk, having snatched the bottle from Misha Stogov's hands, crawled forward, dragging it heavily along the ground like an ant dragging a pine needle. I barely had time to grab Ivan Afanasyevich by the leg. He turns around angrily. "Let me go, Sasha. Don't stop me." "Where?" I shout. "You're not going to throw it." While Stadnyuk is trying to free his leg, Misha Stogov slips past him and suddenly snatches the bottle. Having stopped arguing, we anxiously watch the orderly who crawled in front of the tank. 40 or 50 meters away from him, Misha's head suddenly hit the ground. The poor fellow had been killed. Ivan Afanasyevich cries out sorrowfully. Silently, I look at the motionless orderly. A fascist tank was cautiously crawling on him. I mentally imagine how the heavy caterpillar will now press Misha's body into the ground, and in impotent rage I scratch the dried earth with my fingernails, hardly restraining myself from jumping up and screaming not to rush towards the steel machine. And yet some fierce force tosses me up. I run to the disembodied body of Misha Stogov in the hope of grabbing the cherished bottle. Something hot burned my side. I stumbled and fell to the grass. Stadnyuk was sprawled beside him, cursing. "Where vive, Sasha?" Seeing my sweaty face, he grumbled angrily. "Where the evil one is carrying you, we're in the crosshairs of a machine gunner." Treacherously, I look around and sigh with relief. 3 tanks are burning brightly on the right, and Sergeants Polyvoda and Siroshtin are running towards us fast, wagging like a hare. Polyvoda holds at the ready a bunch of grenades, and Siroshtin a bomb. They had no time to make 24 steps, but fell as if underfoot. "And these were killed," sorrowfully exclaimed Stadnyuk, and immediately shout, "Look! Alive! Misha is alive!" Looking at the approaching tank, I saw how, a few seconds before the track of the fascist tank, shining in the sun, polished on Russian roads, covered the place where Stogov was lying. He swiftly rolled to the right and froze between the tracks of the approaching machine. I already knew that mechanic drivers of fascist tanks usually made a turn around the axis at the place where they noticed the Soviet fighters. Involuntarily, I clamped my eyes shut so as not to see the tank dancing on the body of my orderly. And when I opened my eyes, I saw that the tank, without delay, was coming at us. Misha Stogov's endurance saved his life. The mechanic driver apparently considered him killed or seriously wounded, and therefore did not suppose that he could slip out from under the truck. Now the fascist was also trying to push us into the ground. Suddenly, a gigantic torch soared above him. The car disappeared in smoke and flames of burning gasoline. "Well done, Misha." Stadnyuk and I jumped up and rushed to the burning tank. Almost machine-gunned, I cut off a fascist who jumped out of the open hatch of the turret. The second head in a tank helmet popped out of the hatch like a burr, knocks down by a stick, falls back. Having circled the tank, I bumped into Misha Stogov. He wrinkles from the pain caused by a huge scratch, visible through the torn on the back of his uniform and shirt. Apparently, he was caught by some sharp protrusion on the bottom of the tank. I fall down next to Misha, and groping him carefully, I repeat joyfully and amaze. "Knife? Alive, Misha?" "That's right, alive, Comrade Lieutenant." Misha answers not quite confidently. "Why did you steal the bottle without permission, Comrade Stogov?" I ask in a deliberately stern voice, trying to hold back a smile. A sly grin slipped across the lips of the orderly. "Nussy, so you, Comrade Komrati, constantly punish us to show initiative." "That's right, Comrade Stogov," I shouted, running up Stadnyuk, affectionately stroking Misha's arm. "Initiative in battle is necessary." Or shaking his revolver, he added, "I've just killed another fascist. I didn't let him slip through the escape hatch." I look incredulously at his orderly and think with admiration, is it really our quiet Stogov? And I was worried that his nerves will give up in the fierce fighting, and I involuntarily remembered the words of Captain Tonkanoshenko, who taught that a truly brave man can become only one who has a highly developed sense of duty. Helping Stogov, we crawled to the fighters, who with accurate aiming fire did not allow the fascist infantry to move forward. All 6 tanks attacking us were hit, but this victory came at a high price. 22 men lost in this battle, our battalion. Both mortars were broken by direct hits of shells. 3 guns were destroyed. 1 gun, together with the gunners, was pressed into the ground by a tank, but he himself stood without a turret. It was blown off by the explosion. The gunners of the neighbouring gun managed to avenge their dead comrades. I found Captain Tonkonoshenko behind one of the hit tanks. Our Petrenko was bandaging him. Bandaging his wound, he said. It's nothing. The bone is intact. It will heal soon. Everything will be all right. Medicine will not. Lucky me. Z unhappily grinned at the commander. At least not in the head hit by a bullet, but only in the arm. Fortunately in the left. Waiting for the end of bandaging. Continues. We can't attack the enemy with the remaining forces. We will die ourselves and the task will not be solved. We will keep the fascists under fire, not allowing them to attack the regiment headquarters. The battalion commander's foresight was justified. The infantry and surviving tanks, not daring to renew the attack on the village, are firing at the height where we are entrenched. They are gathering courage to attack, Tonkonoshenko said. From the woods to the east of the village, I can hear more and more gunshots and machine gun bursts. I find tanks moving slowly toward the village. They are firing from short stops. Behind them, the infantry is running over. Captain Tonkonoshenko states with satisfaction. Say, that's all that's left of the 30 tanks that broke through. The Germans approached the village. From there, they were hit with machine guns and cannon. This forces them to streamline around the village from two sides. As soon as the nearest group of Nazi tanks equaled us, we open fire. One tank catches fire, the survivors, leaving the infantry to their fate, speed up. Fascist soldiers panic, fleeing after them. 10 Soviet tanks appear behind the retreating ones. Behind them, a little behind, a wide chain of infantrymen are advancing. Well, now we can strike. The commander's face brightens. He authorizes the artillerymen to use up all the remaining shells. Supported by the fire of the surviving gun, we rush into the attack. The captain for some time tries to be ahead, but we overtake him. The Nazis, attacked from both sides, put up unorganized resistance. By 6 o'clock in the evening, the surviving 4 tanks and the remnants of infantry were knocked out of our positions. We collected the remains of our fallen comrades to commit them to the ground with military honors. We laid them in an even row on the spread-out overcoats at the edge of the mass grave, looking over the dead with a farewell glance. I look especially closely at the faces of Lieutenants Stepanov and Sergeants Mishin, Lunin, and Plitnyaj, and a disturbing thought squeezed my heart. How short is our battle path, brothers? After all, I could be at the edge of the grave today, too. Lieutenant Voronov lifted the skinny body of Stepanov, gently lowered it into the pit next to the other dead, covered his friend's face with a handkerchief and, taking off his helmet, whispered sorrowful, "Farewell, Pasha." 'Tis a threefold battle salute sounds. Saying goodbye to comrades, we throw handfuls of loose earth. Many people have tears in their eyes. 17 mortars return to their firing positions. We are met by Sad Oremenko. Of the platoon commanders, survived only Voronov F. Even this hardened athlete looks exhausted, his handsome, swarthy face stooped, straight nose sharpened, and lively brown eyes fringed with dark circles. It is pitiful to look at my brave orderly. Apparently, the scratch on his back, eaten away by salty sweat, was making itself felt. The kindly petty officer helps him to take off his torn uniform and shirt. "What a snag, my friend," he gasps in surprise. "Such a wide black and blakitne stripe on your back." Having learned that Stogov had been under a fascist tank, he remarks, "Thanked God, Mikhailo, you got off happily. How did you not get crushed by a caterpillar? Petrenko, where are you?" Okremenko sends Suzik to look for Petrenko, and himself takes out of his leather bag, which he never part with, thread and a needle, and begins diligently sewing up the hole in his uniform. Having finished the work, with strong, thick fingers, he checks the strength of the seam and carefully brushes off the salt that has seeped out of his uniform, jokingly saying, "Wow, how much salt? Flies eat it. We can salt the soup for our whole company. And you, Nikolai Fedorovitch, collect it from all gymnasirs and give it to the replenishment of the supply platoon." "Yes, Comrade Komrati," Ohimenko jokingly stretches out. "May you collect it and hand it under, but it's better to load the cannon with salt and hit the naked fascist asses with it." As always, unhurriedly, the staid Petrenko enters. Seeing him, Okremenko points at Sto. "Marvel, Sidor, there's a thing on Mikhail's back, lubricated with something. Maybe you have alcohol." The petty officer looks into the face of the instructor with a secret hope. "No alcohol," Petrenko replies brokenly, licking his chapped lips. "But iodine." An instructor carefully examines and feels Misha's back. "It's nothing bad, Stogov," he reassures. Now we'll disinfect the scratch with iodine and put a bandage on it to prevent infection. Having cleaned myself up, I decided to see the commander to ask him for bottles with flammable liquid and grenades, the stock of which was used up. At the battalion ammunition station, the petty officer was told that there were not enough of them in the rifle companies. Remembering the vicissitudes of today's battle, I'm not sure that the Mortars again will not have to fight closely with the Nazis. Having learned that I was going to the commander, Petrenko asked me to get bandages and iodine. When I arrived at the commander's office, a battalion paramedic, an elderly man who, according to Petrenko, had worked as a village paramedic near Ryazan before his enlistment, was bustling about. He carefully removed the dried, dirty bandage and, treating the wound on his leg, shook his head reproachfully. "It is necessary for you, Comrade Combat, to lie down in the infirmary, or the wound will become inflamed and, God forbid, they will tear off your leg." "It's nothing, Stefan Mikheyevich, it'll be all right." Maichen Tonoshenko calms the paramedic. "Try not to make it inflamed, treat it thoroughly." We will. Stefan Mikheyevich takes out a small bottle from his bag. "Now we'll rub it with alcohol." "Alcohol," Tonkonoshenko revives. "So give it here. Why waste good for nothing? Treat the wound with iodine, and with alcohol we'll disinfect the mental wounds." But when he saw the tiny vial, he waved his hand in annoyance. "And you, Stefan Mikheyevich, have not got enough alcohol. It is not only for mental wounds is not enough, but also for an ordinary scratch." Noticing me, the commander friendly shows me the bunks. "Sit down, Lieutenant, report what you have." Listening to my requests, Tonkonoshenko frown. "Where am I going to get you bottles and grenades? They are also in the rifle companies on a strict account. There are very few of them left at the battalion's ammunition station, and tomorrow the trouble will start again." "And if tomorrow you, Comrade Combat, will lead the Mortars into the counterattack again, what will they go with? With mortars? What will they use to meet the tanks? Let them be crushed, like the guys from the Commandant's company today." "We calm down, Lieutenant, calm down." Tonkonoshenko wrinkles his nose at the pain the paramedic is causing him, tearing off the dried bandage from his arm. "The Mortars fought well today, I don't mind." A light, sad grin suddenly touches his lips. "I guess we'll have to reorganize your company into a rifle company and keep it in reserve. By the way, how many mortars do you have left?" "Two." "What kind of mortar company is that?" "More like a rifle platoon with 2 mortars." The smile suddenly disappears. The commander frowns. "Okay, I'll give you some bottles and grenades, but take care of them. Use them wisely." Having received an assurance from the paramedic that he would provide us with dressing materials, I returned to the company and immediately sent a petty officer and a SAN instructor to pick up all the promised things. The next day the Nazis twice rose to the attack, each time after a strong artillery and mortar preparation, and both times their attacks were repulsed. Everywhere where the eye reaches, the corpses of enemy soldiers. Scouts say that the corpses of officers fascists remove at the cost of any sacrifice. Soldiers do not receive such an honor. Too many of them die. But our battalion also won at a high price. In the rifle companies suffered heavy losses. In the 3rd Company remained in the line only 19 soldiers and commanders. It got dark. I leisurely look around the positions where tomorrow we'll have to take a new battle. In the air there is a suffocating stench of quickly decomposing in the July heat fascist corpses. The soldiers are so exhausted that they did not clean them up. Captain Tonkonoshenko tracked me down. "And you have to be sent to the rear," he exclaimed sadly when he saw my bandaged head. "Soon there won't be a single company commander left in the ranks." I scratched my eyebrow. "Nonsense, Comrade Captain." I hastened to calm the distressed commander. "It's the instructor overdid it so that the wound wouldn't get contaminated." "Thank Allah." Tonkonoshenko smiled tiredly. "Here's what, Lieutenant. Combine the remnants of the 3rd Company with your mortars and take command." Wagging his finger, he added, "He'd keep the defended area at all costs. Don't count on help." "Yes," I responded without enthusiasm, and sighed heavily. Tonkonoshenko, limping, came close to me and said with a tenderness not peculiar to him, "Go, brother, prepare the men for new battles, and take care of them and yourself." The huge losses suffered by the fascists sobered them up. The next day they completely stopped firing. Unaccustomed silence came. Oremenko, satisfied that the Germans do not prevent him from quietly handing out lunch, stroking his wheat moustache, good-naturedly shouts, Come on, boys, Rubai, as you should. You can't get much on an empty stomach. Who wants more? Stadnyuk, taking advantage of the respite, held a general meeting of the surviving communists of both companies, summarized the results of the past battles, honored the memory of the dead, celebrated the distinguished. With special praise, communists spoke about the bravery and selflessness of Lieutenant Voronov, Sergeants Siroshtana and Mishin. After the meeting, Stadnyuk, enjoying the unusual silence, dreamily spoke. Well, Komruti, it seems, stopped the fascist. Maybe he won't be able to advance any further. The reserves will come up, and will drive the uninvited guests back to their fatherland. Let's see what they say in our for the honor of the motherland. He selected a few unread issues of the newspaper and ordered Stogov to distribute the rest among the platoons. Sitting down comfortably, the political officer carefully looks through one newspaper after another. Nukamroti, things seem to be really getting better, he exclaimed joyfully, shaking the newspaper. The governments of the USSR and Great Britain have concluded an agreement on joint actions in the war against Germany. To my remark that this agreement will not soon manifest itself, because it will take a long time for its implementation, and in the meantime we have to fight alone, Stadnyuk eagerly objected. Shell, let the agreement have only political significance, but for the morale of the fighters it is not insignificant. They will now know that the Soviet Union is not alone in the fight against fascism. This is what will have to be emphasized in conversations with the fighting. Reading the next issue of the newspaper, Stadnyuk explodes. What a bastard! What a vile, cruel beast has planned to conquer the world. Man perishes from peace. He flourishes only from war. If the Jews did not exist, they had to be invented. Only cruelty drives man to movement. Who can dispute my right to destroy millions of people of an inferior race who multiply like insects? Tearing myself away from the captured machine gun, I also pick up a newspaper. My attention was attracted by a note about the message of the German Inform Bureau that in the next few days the bulletins will not contain details about operations in the East. It means that things on the Soviet-German front are not going as the Nazis had hoped. When the newspapers were read, Stadnyuk suggested, "Trolls go and talk to the soldiers. After all, there is something to talk about. True, it is not quite clear what is the situation on our fronts, but in general the matter is clear. Everywhere the fights are going on as well as we have here, not for life, but for... We're splitting up into platoons. In Lieutenant Voronov's platoon, which now included all the survivors of the mortars, the soldiers huddled near Saroshtan. Noticing me, he interrupted his reading. I waved my hand. After reading an article about one of the battles near Vitebsk, Saroshtan squared his shoulders and recited a poem with a cheerful smile, as if he had just composed it himself. An empty drummer, arrogant and zealous. For a week he beat an empty drum, but only another week came and the drum was gone. But there'll be a third week for the fascists. Oh, woe to you, drummer Emilia. We've shown the damned Führer Emil where the crawfish are, angrily exclaimed Brashenko, and we'll show him again. The fascists will try the raw Russian Mother Earth with their flanks. Each of them will get 2 our shins. When I told about Hitler's delusions, the indignant mortars jumped up from their seats. Stadnyuk, who came running to the noise, having learned about the reason for the outrage, smiled satisfied. Well done, newspapermen. They have placed explosive material. Everyone should read this article thoughtfully and more than once. It was clear to us before who we are fighting against, and now we will fight even more viciously. We are returning to the command and observation post. Following us into the dugout are Petrenko and a fighter with gloves. Comrade Lieutenant, here is Comrade Mitin. Matenko pointed to his companion. Before the war, he was a teacher of German language in a secondary school. He collected a lot of documents and unsent letters from the killed fascists. We looked through and read something. Soldiers' books tell us which units are advancing against us, and letters tell us the mood of the personnel. Well, what did you find out? I asked Mitin. You see, Comrade Lieutenant, he began thoughtfully, adjusting his thin-rimmed glasses. Judging by the documents, an infantry division is advancing in our direction, and its considerable forces have broken through in this area. In letters home, soldiers and officers report on the places through which they passed. They express joy that Germany will soon receive a very large amount of food. They complain about the stubborn resistance of the Russians, but promise their loved ones a speedy victory. Gradually becoming agitated, Mitin snatches from a large stack of letters, and with growing anger reads excerpts from them. I listen shocked. From my school days, I knew that in the homeland of Marx and Engels, fascist obscurantists had managed, with the support of financial and industrial magnates, to treacherously seize power. But I sincerely believed that they would not be able to deceive the broad masses of the people. However, in the letters of not only officers but also ordinary soldiers, yesterday's workers and peasants, so vile that I was seized with a feeling of great disgust, and disgust for the bandits who broke into the Soviet land in the hope of plunder. When Mitin fully translated the memo to the soldier, Stadnyuk could not stand it. "Enough, comrade. Memo and these 2 letters. Translate them and give them to me. The rest will be sent to the battalion. Right, comrade Comrade?" I agree. Later on, we used the letters and the memo in conversations with the soldiers. From the memo to a soldier, I remembered for all my life such a truly cannibalistic instruction. You have no heart and nerves. You don't need them in the war. Destroy pity and compassion in yourself. Kill every Russian, Soviet. Do not stop. If in front of you is an old man or woman, a girl or a boy, kill. By doing so, you will save yourself from death, ensure the future of your family, and become famous forever. And it must be said that the memo to the soldier was at that moment the most denunciatory document against the fascists. When it got dark, Okremenko fed the soldiers with dinner and gave each of them a can of trophy canned meat. Misha Stogov brought a pot of buckwheat porridge, over which a fragrant steam was rising, silently opened the canned food and put a German flask next to it. After stomping around, he offered me and Stadnyuk to have dinner. "What's in the flask?" "Vodka, comrade, junior political officer. I took it from a dead fascist for water, and something gurgles in it." Stadnyuk unscrewed the cork and, having tasted it on his tongue, spat with disgust. "It stinks. Shall we not, Sasha?" "We won't. I readily agree, and to the great dismay of the orderly. I order him to give the vodka to the orderly. The clock shows 9 o'clock in the evening. It's still light. I call platoon commanders to order precautions for the night. Suzik calls me to the machine. "The third, you." I hear the tired voice of Tonkanozhenko. "Come to me immediately." Having entrusted Stadnyuk to conduct a briefing, I hurry to the battalion commander. In his dugout along the walls are already sitting some unit commanders. Seeing me, Tonkanozhenko silently waved his hand, say, "Make yourself comfortable." When the commanders of the 1st Rifle Company and supply platoon squeezed into the dugout, Tonkanozhenko, stroking his wounded leg, stretched out on the bunk. "Comrades commanders, at 23 hours and 30 minutes we leave the occupied positions and withdraw to Smolensk." The news was so overwhelming that there was a bewildered silence. Then there were heard shouts of annoyance. "Hey, Mother of God, to retreat again. Why leave our positions when we've washed the fascists in blood?" Tonkanozhenko's swarthy face visibly darkens. After waiting for the commanders to quiet down without raising his voice, he continues. "An order is an order, so the situation requires further retreat. The captain directs the beam of the lantern to the map, which he holds in his left hand. The combined detachment of our division withdraws by 2 routes. Our battalion follows, and I, having listed the settlements through which we will go," Tonkanozhenko specifies. "At the crossing of the river Rutavek, we let the main forces of the detachment pass ahead and further follow them. Having given the necessary orders, the commander let us go." At that difficult time, it was difficult for platoon and company commanders, of course, to understand the reason for the retreat of our troops after the successful repulsion of enemy attacks. Therefore, we young lieutenants were very critical of the order received. Many of us fell ill in those days with a very contagious disease, which someone aptly called Lieutenant's rubella. It seemed to us that there in the headquarters did not know the true situation and gave orders that did not correspond to the situation. This situation facilitated the birth of provocative rumors that there were traitors in the headquarters. However, such rumors were resolutely suppressed. The misunderstanding of the reasons for the withdrawal arose because we were poorly informed about the operational situation, whether it was because our battalion was constantly operating apart from its regiment, or there was not enough time. In any case, the commanders could not always explain to their subordinates why it was necessary to leave the positions held in fierce fighting. If we knew, at least in general terms, the situation that developed in the middle of July 1941 to the east of Vitebsk, There would be no doubts about the correctness of the tactics used by the command, neither we nor the soldiers. And the situation, which forced the Soviet command to order the retreat of the 19th and 20th Armies to Smolensk, was in mid-July 1941 extremely unfavorable for the troops of the Western Front. By this time, the 2nd and 3rd Tank Groups of the Nazi Army, which made up half of all the enemy's mobile formations, were in a hurry to complete a deep bypass of the main forces of the Western Front north of Vitebsk and south of Smolensk. Northeast of Vitebsk, a wide gap in the defense of the Soviet troops made a powerful tank roller of General Gotha's group. The 2nd Tank Roller, consisting of tank and motorized divisions of General Guderian, was rapidly advancing from the Orsha area. Both Nazi tank groups were to join up in the Smolensk area. As a result, the main forces of the 19th and 20th Soviet armies were caught in a ring. Drawing now in general outline the situation in which we received the order to retreat, I involuntarily thought, maybe we, platoon and company commanders, should not have known the full scale of the danger, to know about the threat of encirclement hanging over us like a sword of Damocles. If we had known it, it is unlikely that we with such steadfastness held the defended positions. So the United Company, which I commanded, was to follow the reconnaissance patrol in the head marching outpost, where Tonkonoshenko selected the most experienced fighters headed by a stocky, very mobile Kazakh lieutenant, on whose cheekbone face black dots shone with lively eyes. All those selected for reconnaissance were armed with captured automatic rifles, for which we had plenty of ammunition. Anticipating that we would have to interact constantly, I approached the lieutenant, called my name and position. "Lieutenant Akinbayev," he introduced himself. "Shall we cooperate, Comrade Lieutenant?" "We will." The lieutenant turned out to be taciturn. I could hardly find out that he was only the 3rd day in our battalion, and in general he had been fighting from the border. His division was surrounded near Lepel. They fought their way out of the encirclement in separate detachments. Captain Tonkonoshenko left him and the rest of the platoon he commanded in our battalion. "When we withdraw to Smolensk through the headquarters of the 20th Army, I will find my division," said Akinbayev. "Until then I will fight in your battalion." I liked the captain. He commands competently. Turning to the company, I explained the situation to the commanders and set tasks to platoons, indicating the order of abandonment of positions, a detachment to cover the withdrawal ordered to allocate from the platoon that united the survivors of the rifle company. Not even a quarter of an hour passed, as Lieutenant Spirin, who commanded this platoon, burst into my office with a whirlwind. "The comrade lieutenant," Spirin's voice is interrupted by a strong excitement. "The soldiers refuse to leave their positions." "What do you mean they refuse?" But perhaps I couldn't hide my confusion, having encountered a refusal to carry out an order for the first time. "We didn't bury more than half of the company on this earth to give it to the Germans voluntarily. You talk to them yourself and understand their mood," suggested the lieutenant and waved his hand with annoyance. We run to the platoon. It is already dark. At the bunker we hear excited voices. When we squeezed into the middle, the voices quieted down. "What's the matter, comrades?" I'm trying my best to speak calmly. "I was told that you refused to carry out the order." Soldiers, in a strong excitement, trying to answer, interrupting each other. Quiet, comrades. Don't forget that we can be overheard by the enemy. Someone explain." Else my soft voice, which sounded very ordinary in the silence of the night, had a calming effect. The sergeant standing next to me, shrugging his mighty shoulders, calmly explained. "Nerves, comrade lieutenant, all nerves. We pour blood on every line, we beat the face of a fascist, and then we run. Yesterday, to hold this position, we lost more than half of the company. And now, when the beaten German has calmed down, we voluntarily abandon it. So there's a rumor that there are traitors in the headquarters. Why leave a good position for the enemy?" Again the soldiers murmured. "Don't let the fascists go any further." I'm listening without interrupting. Such a manifestation of discontent subordinates for some reason does not cause anger. With such soldiers can fight. I think about the stroppy fighters with unexpected tenderness, trying in the darkness to see their faces. "Nachjes and comrades," I began quietly and kindly. "An order is an order. It must be obeyed unconditionally. Do you have any reason not to trust our command?" "No, of course not," replied the sergeant loudly. "We do, though we do not understand why we are retreating." "Well then," I concluded, "let us end our conversation here. In a more favorable environment, I will try to explain why we are forced to retreat. And now, I order Spirin, lead lieutenant, your platoon to the assembly area. Lieutenant Spirin, after waiting until the soldiers took the duffel bags and dismantled ammunition, silently waved his hand and moved along the message. Lowering their heads, moving their feet heavily, the soldiers followed the command. Having written down on a sheet of notepaper the names of the villages through which we will pass, and the area of the camping area where the squad remaining in position should join us, I give the last instructions to the commander of this squad. The battalion scouts rode eastward from the assembly area on unsaddled peasant horses. Half an hour later, having received a final farewell from Tonkonoshenko, I and my company, we are marching along the forest road, keeping the direction to the village of Novoselki. From time to time checking the map and compass, we move eastward without any adventures. At the beginning of the road, we hear behind us rare and short machine gun bursts. The dark night sky is illuminated by flares fired by the fascists at intervals. Apparently, they again missed our withdrawal. Above the horizon rose the glow of a large fire, where, judging by the map, was the town of Liozno. From the darkness came a horse stomping. Lieutenant Akinbayev's scout reports that the way through the nearest village is free. The column is drawn into it. The night silence is broken only by dog barking. Not the slightest signs of life can be seen in the windows of the houses. Through the dog barking one hears, as always, the cheerful voice of Vasily Sarosh. "Oh boys, I wish I had some cold milk now." As if in answer to his dreamy exclamation, a dark figure jumped out from the corner of the nearest hut. "Comrades, so you are ours, Soviet?" Soviet, ye, responds Seroshtan. "And you are not Soviet?" "How could we not be Soviet?" Took offense at the man in an unbuttoned shirt with the collar pulled down over his pants. Walking beside Seroshtan, he explained, "We are local collective farmers." So why did you hide from us?" Seroshtan persisted. "We thought the Germans had come," sighed the man. "My elder brother came from Zhitshitsy. He says that German motorcyclists broke in from the direction of Demidov. This information alarmed me. The village mentioned by the local resident is located on the road Demidov-Rudnya. We can assume that Demidov is captured by the Germans. Consequently, we have to cross the road before it is not saddled with the fascists. I stopped the company, ordering the men not to disperse. "What's your name?" I ask the collective farmer. Sedar answers and adds, "There are 3 brothers besides me. The eldest, 2 for the brigadier in the collective farm, 2 more brothers in the army are fighting, and I am the youngest, also in the collective farm, working as a stable boy. I asked to go to the front, but the military enlistment office said, 'Wait, we'll call you up.' How old are you?" I was surprised, looking at the sturdily bunched, tall figure of the boy. "Already 16. Maybe you will take me with you, eh?" "I'm strong," he said begrudgingly, clapping himself vigorously on his broad, bulging chest. Having sent Lieutenant Voronov with a report to the commander, I answer Fidi that I cannot enroll him in the company, and advise him to go to Smolensk and there to report to the regional military enlistment office. I ask the boy to look for his older brother to clarify his information about the Germans, but Fidia says that his brother and his men are organizing a cattle drive into the forest and hiding the collective farm goods. While we were talking, the locals gathered near the column. They stood silently listening to the conversation. Okremenko asking one of the old men for a cigarette. "Negromadians, can you give me some milk? I haven't tasted it for a long time. I've even forgotten the taste." A hunched grandfather leaning on a thick stick suddenly grumbled angrily. "I'd like to treat you with a stick instead of milk, you freeloaders. Where are you running away from the German? Why were you given weapons? Did you swear to lay down your lives for your country, you sons of bitches?" The old man was raising his voice. "Well, not so much stew." The petty officer was embarrassed. "We are not running, but retreating. We were ordered to hold our position, so we did. We lost many comrades there, and now we're retreating, so it's the right thing to do, if the command orders it, and apparently remembering my words about the necessity of maneuvering in battle," he added. "Maneuvering did you while maneuvering. You, grandfather, offend us in vain. I interfere. The situation is as it is." And loudly, trying to be heard by all the locals gathered around, I tell about the fascist troops breaking through to Smolensk, which bypass us from the north and south. Smolensk must be saved. That's why we are ordered to retreat. Otherwise we will die without use and Smolensk will be captured. Suddenly women made their way to the formation. They brought pots of milk and slices of rye bread, treat the soldiers. They thank them embarrassedly. Their mood is easy to understand. They, like me, were ashamed that without a fight we leave women, old men and children at the mercy of the enemy.